Welcome to this week's edition of The Beach Buzz. My name is Georgette, and I'm the host of this show. Each week, I highlight what is happening in Jack's Beach and how it may impact you. In this episode, I will review what I learned from the 3 land development code workshops and provide you with feedback, or at least my opinion on those workshops. To provide you with some background as to why we are doing an LDC rewrite, let's go back to about 2018, and that is when I was first elected to council. When I first ran, my main goals were to make sure that the city had a vision and a mission and a strategic plan, as well as an operational plan on how to implement that strategic plan each year. All this really is alignment to make sure that you're doing A before B before C to eventually get to Z. Once we had that vision and that mission, we revisited our comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan is the big picture as to what we want our city to look like from way above. So where do we see environmental and recreational land? Where do we see businesses? Where do we see industrial? Where do we see residential land? That is the comprehensive plan. It's comprehensive throughout the city, and it provides that really high upper look. From the comprehensive plan, we then move into the land development code. That is what these workshops are about. The land development code is to prescribe what can be done in each zone within the city, and when followed precisely, it will eventually lead to that 30-year plan that was laid out initially in the comprehensive plan. So if all development followed exactly to a T what was allowed in the land development code, then the comprehensive plan would be met. But let's face it, we all know that that is not how it really works. When you want to deviate from the land development code, you end up in either the Board of Adjustments or the Planning Commission. A simplified way of looking at the difference between these two boards is that if you are a homeowner and let's say you want to put a patio in the back, you would go in front of the Board of Adjustments because you want to vary from what the LDC lays out. And that variance could be lot coverage, it could be setbacks, it could be a whole bunch of things. But that is because you want to vary from what is allowed. Now, developers more often tend to fall in front of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission addresses issues such as rezoning, possible changes to the land development code or the comprehensive plan, as well as conditional uses and planned unit developments. Conditional uses and planned unit developments make up the majority of the applications that the Planning Commission addresses. Now that you have a basic foundation of what the LDC is, how it fits into everything else, and what the boards address, let's go back to why we are even looking at rewriting the LDC. So we want to make sure that the LDC aligns with the city's new vision and mission, which frame the comprehensive plan. So now we have to figure out how best to implement that comprehensive plan. Our current LDC hasn't been addressed in decades, and so we know that we needed to address a lot of the issues that we've seen over that time. The goals of this rewrite are multi. So the first one is to preserve neighborhood character. The second is to make the LDC user-friendly, so you don't need a lawyer to try and interpret it. The third is to remove any of the outdated sections because legally the state has changed laws and over time, some sections of the LDC no longer align with others. Another goal is to just make sure it flows better, and you'd really appreciate that if you've ever read the LDC. The fifth goal is to make sure that we add tables and visuals to provide clarity to the person who is actually trying to interpret the LDC. The last couple goals are to make sure that you identify any special areas within the city and to overall reduce the number of variances that come in front of the Board of Adjustments. This helps you as property owners and the Board of Adjustments as a volunteer board from having to review a lot of applications that otherwise would have been automatically accepted. So the land development code needed to be updated to address the needs and the conditions of the city today versus how it was decades ago. While the workshops didn't get into the fine details of the changes that have made to the LDC, it did address some of the larger overarching themes. And those topic areas were parking, accessory dwelling units, lot coverage, townhouses, and supplementary standards. So let's start with parking. There are two pieces of the parking changes. The first one really deals with the downtown area, and then the other deals with the rest of the city. So let's focus on the downtown part. We're looking at a possible 50% reduction in parking requirements for downtown businesses if certain criteria are met. So they would be able to do a reduction if they had a certain amount of bike parking. And throughout the workshop conversations, that also started to include golf cart parking, which we'll get to in a little bit. The central business district was also divided into different areas. There is the whole central business district where businesses would be able to reduce their parking by up to 50%. And there is this parking exempt zone that extends from the pavilion up to Casa Marina. And no parking would be required for businesses that operate in that area. I understand the rationale to not have required parking in dense downtown districts, but singling out this 5-block area that's on the oceanfront may not be as feasible as it was originally thought out to be. For example, there are no exclusions for hotels, so hotels would not have to provide parking. When asked about that, the consultants had a two-pronged answer. First is that markets should decide and that no hotel would open up a business if it didn't have parking, which I kind of see that. My concern is in the second part of the rationale, that the city has ample public parking in the downtown area. So therefore, people who want to frequent those businesses would park in the public parking lots. However, if you look long term as to what the plans are for downtown, it's for the development of a lot of those lots. So we would lose some of that parking. And even if you were to go spot by spot and you made sure that you replaced all of the current parking spaces in any kind of a new development, you are not accounting for any of the new demand in any additional business that's going to be coming into the downtown area. And here we're talking about the Latham Plaza parking lot and the Pier parking lot specifically, but there are also plans for the Ritz parking lot across the street. When those lots start to develop, and they will, the only question is when and to what capacity. Well, then we are going to either have a net zero gain of parking, or we might have some additional parking, but I doubt the new parking would be able to accommodate all of the current spaces that we have, plus any spaces for any of the new businesses. This is my concern with the parking exempt zone. If we choose to do the parking exempt zone, we need to make sure that we really define what types of businesses would be exempt. And we also consider in the future, as those current public parking lots get developed, how we are going to address the needed parking for any new businesses while also providing parking for our beaches and the current businesses. The new proposed parking standards also impact businesses outside of our central business district, where businesses in the central business district would get up to a 50% reduction in parking requirement. Other businesses would get up to a 30% reduction in parking requirements. The amount of the reduction is really based off of things such as bike parking, golf cart parking, the business's proximity to the urban trail, and added shade trees. Those are the highlights of the changes to the parking criteria in the LDC, but few details were truly provided as the city is waiting until they receive all the feedback from these workshops in order to refine the draft LDC before it is released to the public. The second topic discussed was lot coverage. Currently, single-family households can go up to a 35% lot coverage, and that is total. That includes the main structure as well as any accessory structures, driveway, sidewalk, pavers, patios, and decks. The Board of Adjustments has regularly approved additional lot coverage up to 49%. Remember, any adjustment from the code needs to be determined by a hardship of the property, not by what the property owner wants to do on the property. So the lot has to be a substandard size. It needs to be oddly shaped and things like that. Let's say the in-laws are going to be moving in and you need a shed in the back to escape to. That is not a hardship of the property. That's an individual hardship, but not one from the property. So the Board of Adjustments is only supposed to be approving hardship adjustments based off of the shape and the characteristics of the property itself. A common hardship is that an individual's lot is what is called non-standard lot. The square footage of the lot is smaller than the minimum square footage noted in the LDC. And this is a common hardship. So you could have a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet, but a neighborhood's lot sizes are mainly about 6,250 square feet. All of these lots are considered substandard because they don't meet the minimum lot size. And this is seen throughout the city. The main rationale for this is because when the city adopted the current LDC, it used the suburban metrics that the state was using throughout the state. So they were trying to put a uniformed model on top of a very unique city. So needless to say, we have so many non-standard lots. One of the ways that the city is looking at addressing this in the new LDC is to adjust what the minimum lot sizes are. By doing this, you now remove a lot of the hardship that was previously available to many property owners. That said, we also don't want to put them in a box. So, to address all of these changes, the new proposed lot coverage is 35% for the main structure and then up to an additional 15% for all accessory units, as well as driveways, sidewalks, patios, and sheds, to name a few. Remember, the goal here is to reduce the number of applications in front of the Board of Adjustments. This helps property owners because they don't have to apply to go in front of the Board of Adjustments. It would be a regular transaction through the planning department. And anything that deviates outside of these new criteria would be the cases that go in front of the Board of Adjustments. There are two other somewhat big changes that have been suggested. The first is accessory dwelling units. Now, these accessory dwelling units are rather small, and they're only allowed in multifamily zoning districts. They would be conditional use, so any property owner who wants to add an accessory dwelling unit would have to go in front of the Planning Commission for approval. In addition, it is limited by the square footage, and it also has to provide its own parking space. Moreover, this unit would not be able to have its utilities separate from the main house. And this is another portion of the requirement that accessory dwelling units would only be allowed for properties where the owner of the property lives in the main structure and then has the accessory dwelling unit in the back. What also should be noted is that all accessory dwelling units will count towards the additional 15% on top of the 35% for lot coverage. An unanswered question is, how does one ensure that the property owner is living in the main structure while having that accessory dwelling unit? What is the oversight? How does the city make sure that this is happening if a property is sold and changes ownership? Another change is to townhouses. And let's face it, we've seen a lot of new townhouses. The proposed change is for townhouses west of 3rd, and that is to increase the minimum width for the internal structures to be 24 feet versus 15 feet. And the goal here is to somewhat incentivize or force developers to have a 2-car garage. And in front of that 2-car garage would be a driveway, which would accommodate 2 additional cars. The intention here is to address the parking issues that we've seen throughout the city with a lot of these townhouses. It should be noted that we cannot treat townhouses or any individual living structure differently from any other individual living structure. So we can't force townhouses to have parking for 4 cars where a single family residence can have parking for only 2. By law, we have to treat them all the same. In addition, we are not allowed to mandate higher parking requirements for short-term rentals versus any other residential units. Needless to say, the state has really tied our hands here. The final area I would like to address is the supplemental standards part of the LDC. Currently, we don't have restrictions on the number of boats that can be on a property. The proposed changes allows for only 2 boats maximum per yard that can be seen from the front, so in the front yard. While there's a discussion about changing the standards for boats, there are no similar standards for changing recreational vehicles on individual properties. The last change I would like to discuss is about fences. We all like our fences. And so here, it would remain the 6-foot maximum fence height for any fence behind the front face of your house. But there could be an additional 2-foot lattice work on top of that for any kind of additional privacy or just something for your vines to grow on. I would like to reiterate that all of the topics discussed in this episode were the highlights of possible changes to the Land Development Code. We have not discussed the comprehensive changes to the Land Development Code because that information is not yet available. If you're concerned about parking standards, parking requirements, the downtown parking exempt zone, the number of boats you can have in your front yard, lot coverage, or any of the other things that I've discussed, please contact your council members to let them know your concerns. They are going to be your main point of contact in helping to shape our new Land Development Code. I want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you found this information useful, please share it with your friends and neighbors. In the next episode, I will discuss some of the big topics I see this year in our local elections, including the urban trails. So please tune in October 3rd and share it with your friends. Just a note, on September 26th, Beaches Watch will hold its candidate forum. It will be from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Jacksonville Beach Community Center by Sunshine Park on South Beach Parkway. I hope to see you there. Until then, continue to embrace the beach life. The preceding episode was paid for and approved by the Campaign to Elect Dumont for Jacksonville Beach Mayor.